we can start from looking at the first question everybody always asks is, how do I get out of prison? So if you have somebody that's in prison right now with a list of charges against them, the thing I always first look for are how serious are the charges and is there any bail or bond that's being offered? I believe in this case, what we saw from the court records is that there is a bail that's been offered. I don't know if it's been satisfied yet, but it looks like it's somewhere around $2,000, about $2,100.
It's I think $1,050.
Yeah, I didn't know if there were two different parts
Right.
to that bail because they
Because
said
I
total
actually
bail.
see one for 500 as well.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, but whatever it is, whatever the amount is, then you know that if someone posts bail, they're allowed to get out of prison. The problem that we have here is that most likely immigration has already been notified, and immigration will put on you what's called a detainer. So while you're in prison, you're being held by the state of Georgia, right? So in the United States, the states are different than the federal government. So the state of Georgia is holding you in their prison. They're paying for your meals. Hopefully they're paying for your medical care and a bed. I'd like to say heat, but I've been in a lot of prisons. There's no heat in there. So they're holding her at the expense of the Georgia taxpayer. When you come with bail, they're more than happy to let you go because they don't want to spend that money anymore. But immigration will put a detainer on you. And now a detainer says, hey, when you're ready to let her go, give us a phone call and then hold on to her for a little bit. We'll come pick her up.
Wow.
And so they'll hold on to her until immigration gets a chance to swing around, and then they'll pick her up and bring her to immigration prison instead. Immigration detention is what we call it.
And when we say prison, we're saying jail because she's not in prison as it, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But,
My
right.
apologies. Yeah.
Right. But based on the charges, though, terroristic threats and acts, let's say immigration does not pick her up.
Right.
What are we looking at here? Terroristic threats and acts. How serious is this?
So by itself, it may not be that serious. A lot of these charges are what we call misdemeanors. Depending on what facts they bring against her, I'm sure everyone already knows the facts because it's all been broadcasted over the internet. But it's up to the prosecutor to decide which things he's allowed to actually bring into court. So depending which acts he actually brings into his charging document, into the document that says all of the things that he believes that she did, that'll determine how immigration reacts. So even though it may be a misdemeanor in state court, depending on how it's put into the actual courthouse and how it's handled by the judge, immigration may react completely differently. And they may determine that, in fact, she is what we would call, say, an aggravated felon. They could determine that she is has committed a crime involving moral turpitude. Is it one of these elevated offenses? One is called aggravated felons. The other one is called crime involving moral turpitude. And if you fall into either category, then you could be looking at almost a guaranteed deportation.
Right.
If you don't fall into either category, then you're looking at a deportation, but there's a lot of ways still available to save you before you get deported.
Would our legal issues in Jamaica play a role in that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're talking about aggravated felonies, not so much. When we're talking about crimes involving moral turpitude, and please forgive me for all the legal phrases, if they don't make sense, they don't make sense to most judges either. Everyone's been figuring this stuff out as they go along. But when it comes to crimes involving moral turpitude, same thing, except that it does a little bit. They are allowed to take into account what activities you did overseas, as long as those activities have led to a conviction. You know, in some instances, it may not even need a conviction. If it just involves drug use, for instance, they're allowed to take that into account. But even if you ignore all of that, when you're dealing with human beings, a judge is a human being, right? We look up to them, but they're a human being. The prosecutor's a human being. When they've seen what you've done, they're going to treat you differently. right? They're going to do their best to be as neutral as possible when they're making their decision. But if you did something that's really offensive to them, it's going to affect the way that they make their decision. So if you did something that was offensive in your home country, a lot of them have what's called discretion, and that's the legal ability to look at your case and just say, I don't really like what you did. I don't like you as a person. I don't think you'd be a good fit for the United States. There's limitations to that, but I've seen it happen a lot of times where people just didn't have a good past and it affected them after they came to the United States.
Um, the fact that she has a young child, yeah? How how would you pursue this matter if you were her lawyer? If you can speak on that.
Yeah. So whenever you have someone with a kid, it's always difficult for everybody because you don't want the child to be harmed by whatever the parent did. It's not the kid's fault. And a child, no matter what the personality of the parent, is always going to be looking towards their mother to be around. In that situation, I personally would always emphasize the fact that she has a young baby that shouldn't be pulled from her because there's a lot of benefits that children may get, whether from nursing or just from being close towards their parent within those first few months, even the early years of life. That could gain us some sympathy to at least delay what's coming if we don't have any actual form of relief available. Relief just means a means of staying in the country when they're trying to kick you out. But I know what hurts against it is that if you have another parent available who is considered responsible, who has status in the United States, whether it be a green card or citizenship, then that only makes, it makes the balance a little bit more difficult. And I've had that a number of times where someone told me, well, the father's here. And that's, typically it's the prosecutor, what we call the trial attorney. They're always going to say, well, the father's here, the father's fully available, and it looks like the father has custody. And especially if the father has custody, that makes it even more difficult to try and make an argument to the judge that, hey, she deserves a little bit of mercy because this baby at least needs her for now to be weaned off of her.